dirty as ever. They done had serial killers killed 13 people. And you never heard of them touching their commissary.
Yep.
Your commissary?
Word started spreading that Marlo Mike might be coming home. And the moment that news started moving through certain circles, people had one question, and it had nothing to do with celebration or reunion. What does Boosie Badazz do now? If you know the history, you already understand why that question carries the weight it does. Because we are talking about a man who was at the center of one of the most serious murder-for-hire cases ever connected to a rap artist. A man whose conviction formed the foundation of the most dangerous legal chapter in Boosie's life. A man who, if he ever walked back out into a world full of cameras, podcasts, and platforms designed specifically to amplify exactly this kind of story, would have a lot to say. That's the situation. Here's the full picture. Michael Louding, known in Baton Rouge as Marlo Mike, grew up in the same world that produced Boosie Badazz. Southwest Baton Rouge in the mid-2000s was not an environment that offered much margin for error. Poverty ran deep. Gang activity had established generational roots. The line between making it out and getting swallowed up was thin. And for young men coming up in certain parts of that city, the street economy wasn't an option they chose so much as a reality they were born into. Marlo Mike was not a rapper. He was not someone who sought visibility or wanted his name attached to anything public. He was a street figure who moved in the shadows of a world that was becoming very bright, very fast, because of one man whose star was rising out of that same environment, Torrance Hatch, the artist the world knew as Boosie Badazz. What prosecutors alleged about the relationship between these two men is what made the case unlike almost anything the rap world had seen at that point. The prosecution's theory was not that Marlo Mike and Boosie were just two neighborhood guys running together. It was that their connection was transactional in the most violent way imaginable. Prosecutors alleged that Boosie, by this point one of the biggest names coming out of Baton Rouge with a growing national profile and real money behind him, was paying Marlo Mike to handle situations permanently. Not a partnership of equals, not a crew situation where things got out of hand. An alleged financial arrangement where one man gave the order, provided the money, and another man went and carried it out. That is what prosecutors put in front of a Louisiana jury. The specific killing at the center of the most serious charge involved a man named Terry Boyd. According to prosecutors, Boyd's death in 2009 was not a random act of street violence or a dispute that spiraled. It was an alleged murder for hire, deliberate, calculated, and traceable back to Boosie as the person who prosecutors said orchestrated it from a position of power. Marlo Mike, prosecutors argued, was the man who physically carried it out. The charge against Boosie was first-degree murder. In Louisiana, that charge carried with it the possibility of the death penalty. Not a drug charge, not a weapons count, the state of Louisiana looked Torrance Hatch in the face and said they were prepared to pursue execution. Marlo Mike was the linchpin of the entire theory because his alleged actions formed the foundation of the prosecution's case. The trial ran through 2012, and it did not end the way prosecutors had planned. After sitting through the testimony and arguments of one of the highest-stakes criminal proceedings the rap world had ever been attached to, the jury came back with a not guilty verdict on the murder charge. Boosie walked out of that courtroom acquitted on the most serious count against him. He didn't walk out of that era without consequences. Separate drug charges kept him incarcerated until 2014, but the murder charge that could have taken him away forever ended in an acquittal. That is the documented legal outcome, and no internet commentary changes what that jury decided. Marlo Mike's story ended very differently. He was convicted in connection with Terry Boyd's killing. The sentence handed down was life without the possibility of parole. Not a 10-year bid, not a stretch with early release built in. Life without parole in Louisiana means exactly what it sounds like. The door closes and the state designs it to stay closed. No projected release date. No parole board to petition. That sentence became part of the permanent legal record, and, for a few years at least, it seemed like that was where the story would stay. Then Charleston White started making noise. If you know Charleston White, you know he operates at a volume most people are not prepared for. He is not a rapper, not a journalist, not a lawyer. He is someone who built one of the most polarizing platforms in internet culture by being willing to say out loud and on camera what most people either keep private or frame carefully. His personal history, his criminal record, his own incarceration as a young man, is central to how he presents himself and why a segment of the audience takes what he says seriously. He is not approaching these topics from a distance. He comes at them as someone who says he lived inside the world he now critiques. Charleston White has gone at Boosie publicly and repeatedly. He has challenged Boosie's street credibility directly, questioned the narrative around what happened during those Baton Rouge years, and made clear that he does not consider the public conversation around Boosie's acquittal to be the full picture of what went down. But the specific development that has pushed this story back into active circulation is more pointed than general criticism. White has been publicly vocal about Marlo Mike specifically, not just relitigating the past, but actively pushing the idea of fighting for his freedom. He has raised questions about whether the conviction was just. He has positioned himself as someone not willing to accept that a life sentence handed down years ago is necessarily the final word. Whether that campaign ever gains legal traction is a separate question. What it has already done, regardless of any courtroom outcome, is keep Marlo Mike's name attached to Boosie's in the minds of every new audience that discovers the story. And that is where the real stakes live. Because here's what most of the online commentary misses when it frames this as a physical threat or a street beef. The danger that the Marlo Mike situation represents for Boosie is not physical, it is informational. Think about what it would actually mean if Marlo Mike's case were ever revisited seriously. If an appeal found purchase somewhere in the Louisiana system, if some argument that hadn't been made before reached the right judge at the right moment, if the sentence that was designed to be permanent turned out not to be. A man walking out of prison after serving a life sentence does not just go home quietly. He goes home with a complete and detailed account of everything he allegedly did, everyone he allegedly worked with, and everything he was allegedly told to do and by whom. And he goes home into a media environment that did not exist in 2009. Podcasts, live streams, documentaries, tell-all interviews with audiences in the tens of millions. The infrastructure for that kind of revelation is fully built and constantly hungry for exactly this kind of story. A freed Marlo Mike who chose to tell everything he knew would not be talking to a handful of people on a block. He would be talking to the entire internet within hours. That is the threat that has no preparation and no countermeasure. That is what changes the entire emotional weight of the situation, for anyone whose name might come up in that telling. Boosie has been a complicated and very public figure since his 2014 release. He came home to a fan base that had held him down while he was inside, released music, rebuilt his profile, and found himself at the center of debates and controversies across everything from parenting to social justice to his opinions on subjects far outside his music lane. He became one of the most interviewed and most argued about figures in Southern hip-hop. Candid, unfiltered, willing to say things that generate strong reactions from every side. That version of Boosie is the one most of his current audience knows. But the shadow of the 2009 to 2012 period never fully disappears, no matter how many new conversations get stacked on top of it. Charleston White understood that when he chose Marlo Mike as a focal point, every video about freeing Marlo Mike is also inescapably a video that places Boosie's name back in the context of the most serious allegations he ever faced. Every discussion of the conviction is also a discussion of the acquittal and of what prosecutors argued about who allegedly gave the orders. The two stories are linked. The prosecution linked them in a courtroom, and Charleston White has made sure that link stays visible long after the legal proceedings ended. Whether Marlo Mike ever comes home is a legal question with no clean answer right now. What is not a question is that the campaign around his freedom has already accomplished something significant. It has put a story that many people considered closed back into active circulation with a brand new audience that had never heard it before. And for anyone whose name is attached to that story, that is not a comfortable thing to sit with. Do you think Charleston White's campaign around Marlo Mike could ever produce real legal results, or is this purely an internet pressure play? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe for more breakdowns that go deeper than the headlines ever will.